Welcome back to another video. In last week's we saw how we could automatically trigger our XR ray interactor when we hover over a piece of UI, and in this one we're just going to take a look at how we can create our keypad that enables us to complete our escape room. So first of all, let's dive right in and see what we're going to be making. Okay, so here we are back in the lab. And as you can see, we've still got all our original functionality with the teleport and the hand, which you can get in the previous videos. And then last week, we had a look at how when the user pointed at a piece of UI, it automatically triggers the XR ray interactor so that you can then interact with that UI. And in this video, we're going to take that one step further and just complete our keypad, which is like the key component of our game that allows us to exit and escape the lab. And you'll be able to point at the buttons, be able to enter the code, and it'll say access denied if you get it wrong. Then it'll reset, and then you can add another code. You can take some code bits away, and then if you get the right code, you get the access granted. So that's what we're going to be taking a look at building in this week's tutorial. So let's jump back to where we left last week's and finish off this keypad. This is how we left our last tutorial. We created this piece of UI that automatically activates our UI ray interactor as you hover over, and that allows you to interact with the Unity UI. You don't actually need any of that for this tutorial. You could just drop in the default XR origin with all the ray interactors set up, and this will work with that. All we're really doing is wiring up our keypad functionality through code and then doing the logic for the keypad. Because this keypad in our game is what's going to allow you to escape the lab before it explodes. So the first thing we need to do is finish off the actual design of the keypad, and that's going to be relatively quick. We've already got some buttons set up here, so we're going to duplicate one more. This is going to be called, this is button 3, and we'll change the text to 3, and then we'll just move that across. So we've got a row of 3 buttons. And then we'll take all those 3 buttons, duplicate, and move them down. That takes us to 6. Duplicate it again. That takes us to 9. So the next bit is a bit repetitive, so I'll jump forward. All we're going to do is change the name of each button, and then change the text associated with it as well. And then we also need a back button or a delete button. So delete button 8, because that's in the middle, just there. So we'll duplicate that one, Control D, and we'll call this delete entry button. And the symbol for that is going to be, we'll just do like a backwards arrow, and then we'll drop it down. And we're just going to tweak the size a little bit. So there we go. That's our delete button. We're also going to need somewhere to show the code that we're entering. So for that, you can either use like a TextMesh Pro text box. I was messing around with the TextMesh Pro input text. So I'm going to create one of them. I'm going to go UI, input field, TextMesh Pro. I'm going to make it smaller because it's huge. First of all, give it a name. Let's call this display panel. And we'll scale it down, move it up, and we'll put it just there. And then when we press the buttons, that's where it's going to be shown. I'm going to move that to the top. So it goes back with the panel, the text at the top, the display panel, all the buttons, and then the delete entry. And that's going to make up our keypad. So we're going to control all the logic for this keypad in one script. So I'm going to right click in our scripts folder. I'm going to go create C# script, and we'll call this keypad controller, and then that will compile, and we'll drag and drop that on our keypad. We'll go ahead and rename this to just keypad. You can see here we've got our keypad controller script sitting on our object. So all the buttons are going to communicate with this script here. So let's double click this script and open it up in Visual Studio. I'm going to make this a bit bigger so we can see what we're doing. Oh, too big. Back. And we're going to be using a couple of namespaces. We're going to be using events for this, so we're going to use using Unity Engine .events, and we're also going to be using TextMesh Pro, so we'll be using TM Pro, And that's it. Now we're not going to be using start or update, so they can go goodbye. We're actually going to be controlling a lot of this through lists. And we're going to store our password. The correct password is going to be stored in a list. And we're going to make this public so we can see it in the inspector. So public list of ints. I'm going to call this password. Actually, let's call this correct password. And that is going to be a new list of ints, like so. And we're also going to have a private list, which is going to hold the current entry that we're putting into our keypad. So we'll create another list of ints, and we'll call this the input password list. And again, that's new list. And we're also going to need a reference to our display, so we can actually show what the user's entering. So we can say serialized private TMP, which is Text Mesh Pro, and it is the input field we're using. So you will use that one, and we'll call this one code display. And we also need another serialized field. This is going to be a timer, so that when you enter the wrong code, how long is it? It shows you like access denied, and then it'll reset. So how that period of time we want to control. So we'll say public float reset time. And we can give this initial value if you want to, sort of say like 2 seconds. And we also need another serialized field, which we can use. And that's going to be, we'll keep consistent. We'll put our private keyword in there, and this is going to be a string. And this is going to be our success text. That's small s. Success text. So when you get the code right, it shows you a message, which we'll be able to change for if we want to have multiple keypads doing different jobs. You might want a different message. Then we want a little bit of space in our inspector for our variables to make it all nicely laid out. And we'll also create a header for these next bits. These are going to be our events. So we'll put a title in keypad entry events. They're only going to have 2. One is going to be when you get the correct password. So we want Unity event on correct password. And one when we get it wrong. So we say public Unity event on incorrect password. And then to really have some proper control over this, so we can use it for other puzzles or other areas in our lab if we wanted to. We might want instances where you can go ahead and enter the keypad more than once. So we can say public bool allow multiple activations. And initially we're going to say that's false, so you can only use the key code once, and then it's kind of done with really on this occasion. And we'll also keep track of whether the keypad has already been activated and you've got the correct password. So we'll use a bool for that too. We'll say public bool has used correct code equals false. And that's private. At the moment we're just monitoring it inside this class. But we might want other classes to have access to that to check. Let's say like you went to a door and it was locked and you tried opening the door. That door has to check with its attached keypad whether the correct code has been used. And if it has, then it'll open. If it hasn't, it'll stay shut. But it'll have to access this class in order to check whether the correct code has been used. So we can say, we can give our has used correct code a property that will expose this bool to other classes. So we can say public bool, I'll give this a capital, has used correct code, and we'll open brackets and we'll say get, and then another curly brace, and we want to return whatever our has used correct code currently is. We don't want to be able to set it. We just want the ability to read what this value is here. And that'll make more sense later. That's a property. If you're not sure what those are, you can look those up on Unity's website or see if there's any tutorials around on YouTube. We're not actually going to use it anymore in this class. It's just for access for other classes later on. And that does it with the variables. I'm going to go ahead and save it there a second. Now we'll go ahead and do our first method. And this is going to handle the button presses from the user. So every time the user selects a number from the keypad, it comes into this method. So we're going to call it, it's going to be public. Not going to return anything, so it's void. And we're going to say user number entry. And we're going to take in a number. And it's going to be int selected number. Or just selected num. And then our curly braces. Now, with our password, we only want to be able to allow the user to enter 4 digits. Else we'll be guessing for ages. So with that in mind, we're going to use a logic statement here. This is going to be a guard clause. I'm going to say if input password list dot count is greater than or equal to 4. So every time, in a minute, every time a number comes in from our user number entry, we're going to store it in our list. But first we're going to check that list to see if it's greater than 4. And if it's not, we don't want them to allow to put it as an entry. So we're just going to return straight out of this method. It's not going to do anything more. They're just going to be clicking buttons and nothing's going to happen. It's just going to enter the first 4 digits you enter. But if the password list is less than 4, then we can go ahead and add to our input password list. And we want to add the selected number that the user has picked from the keypad. So we'll say selected number. Go ahead, curly, semicolon. So we'll hold it there for a second. So let me show you. So let's say we're in VR here and we click this button. We want to store that in our password list. And you'll see here, so this buttons by default in Unity have an on click event. So when you click it, it does something. So what do we want it to do? So when we click it, we want it to go straight to the method where it says user number entry. We've entered a number and we're going to add it to our list. So we need to access that method through that button. So to do that, we click on our button, go down to its on click event, drag and drop the keypad in there. Because this is on the keypad, this is where our script is sitting. And then we can select this drop down list and we can highlight the script keypad controller and select user number entry. It's already come up here with default as 1. That's right, that's correct. We're going to be passing 1 to that method. Let's go ahead and do another one on button 2. On its on click event. If you don't see the box here, you can just click the plus and it'll add a section in. Go ahead and drop the keypad in, select the class keypad controller and user number entry. It's already come up for us 2. If you don't see anything in this box, enter 2. On button 3, same again, keypad controller, user number entry in, change it to a 3. And you do that for all buttons. And then the last one, delete entry button, we'll leave for a minute. We'll write a new method to handle that in a second. So now we've got all our buttons and with the user number entry method being called and passing the number of the button from 1 all the way down to 9. Excellent. So you press a button, it gets stored in our list. And then if we enter more than 4, it's just going to stop. So what happens next? Well, once you've pressed a button, you expect to see it in the little window. We're going to create a new method in here called update display, which we haven't written yet. So we can click on the squiggly line, control, full stop, and generate method keypad controller update display. Go ahead and take out the throw exception, and let's update our display. So this is going to be fairly short. Now, first of all, I'm going to clear our coded display. So we access that by accessing our variable, which is of type input field. That's what we're using, and that's called code display. And we want the text element of that property. I'm just going to set it to null. So I'm going to clear it a second. Now then we're going to write the numbers inside of our input password list. This is what the user's pressing. And we're going to step through the list, and each item in that list, we're going to show it to, we're going to put it on our display. For that, we're going to use a loop to move through that list. So we're going to say for int I equals 0, I less than our input password list count semicolon I plus plus. So all this is going to do is it's going to move through our list as long as I is less than the amount of items in our list. So if we've only got 2 items, this loop will only run through twice. And then open up your curly braces, and we're going to say we want our coded displays text to show what's in that list position. So input password list, and then we can use I. So as this loop runs through, it's going to start from the first position in the list, and then it's going to print whatever we've got in that list in that first position. Then it's going to move to the second item in the list, and it's going to add that to it, and so on until it reaches the end of our password list. That's a little confusing. But all we're doing is we're using a loop to move through a list and print it to our code display. We'll go ahead and save that there. Now that should work. Let's dive in and have a look. Just have to hook up a few things in our keypad. We need our code display, so we'll drop that in. It's our display panel. And we can also set up our correct password here. This is what our password is going to be to unlock this keypad. We're going to want 4 items. It's going to be a 4-digit combination. And let's say it's, for the sake of this tutorial, let's give it a really easy one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's fill in our reset time is already 2, so give that a default value. And our success text can be access granted. This won't work just yet, but at least we get some bits filled in. All that's going to happen now when we run and go into VR is that as we enter our keypad text, it's going to come up on the screen. So we've entered 4. Now if you remember, we've got that guard clause in there. So now when we enter press any more buttons, it's just not going to add it to the list. We've reached the limit, and backspace doesn't work. But we can see we can press buttons and it goes into our keypad display. And look here, 1, 2, 3. I've put 4. I put 5 instead of 4. Fix that. So let's go about taking a look at how we can do the back button or delete button. So we've made a mistake and we want to go back. So let's wire up this back button. We're going to jump back into our script and we're going to create a new method for it. So back in our script, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new method and we're going to call it delete entry. Private void delete entry. Now we're not making like a word processor here. This delete entry is literally just going to take the last item in the list and delete it. So how can we do that? First of all, we need to double check that when we hit that back button that we do actually have some entries in our list. We're assuming that the user has already entered something. So we need to check if they haven't already entered a number. So we can say if input password list, dot count is less than or equal to 0, which is effectively saying there's nothing in our list, then we can go ahead and return out of this method. We've got nothing to remove, so don't continue. We then need to get a position on our list and store it that we want to remove. So we can say list position is going to be equal to the length of our list, which is input list.count -1. I put the -1 in there because lists are 0 indexed. So they start counting from 0, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we just want to make sure we're actually removing something that exists in the list in a second. And I'll try and explain that in a bit more detail in a moment. And then when we've got a list position that we want to remove, which is just simply the last entry, we're going to put input password list dot remove at, and we're going to remove the data that's held in our list position, which is the last item we've entered. And go ahead, semicolon, finish that off. And then once we've removed it, we need to then update our display so we're showing the right information to the user. And also note that this is private. We actually need to make it public. That's because we're going to need to see that exposed in the inspector, which we're going to set up now. So we close that down. That's going to compile. And then what we're going to do is on our delete entry button, make sure it's selected, drag in the keypad and go to keypad controller, delete entry. And go ahead and save that. And now let's run and check it's all working. So we're going to start entering the code, 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to hit the back, and it takes the last one off the list. Put 4 in, take it off all the way if you want to. Now when we're pressing it, That guard clause is stopping it removing any more from the lists. Nothing exists. And you can go ahead and start adding some more stuff in. Now that we've got all that set up, let's go ahead and start looking at the logic for when we've entered an incorrect code and actually start looking at some of these events. So let's bring up our script. We're going to need to create a method where we're actually going to check our password. And we want that to automatically happen once the user has entered 4 digits. We don't have a submit button. So it's going to happen automatically so the user doesn't get flustered with all these buttons. So once we've updated the display in our user number entry, so they've entered 4, they're going to be entering 4 digits. Once we've updated the display, we're going to test to see, again, how many numbers do we have in our list. And if that is greater or equal than 4, then we have enough to check the password. So we're going to create a new method called check password. Finish it off with a semicolon. That method doesn't exist, so again, click on the squiggly line, hold Control and full stop, and generate the method. It's going to put it right below. Now this is going to be a relatively small method. We're going to use a for loop to jump through our lists to compare one against the other. So remember, we've got 2 lists, one's holding our correct password and one's holding the list of the user entry. So to move through this, we're going to create a for loop. And we're going to say int I equals 0, and I is going to be less than our password, our correct password count. So effectively it's going to 4, and go I plus plus. And at every point in our list, we're going to compare it with our input password list. So we can say if our input password list at position I, remember it's going to start from 0 and count up. So if position I is not equal to our correct password list at position I, so if they don't match up, well then we can already assume that the whole thing is incorrect. You get one wrong, that's it. Not very forgiving. And we're going to go and jump to a new method that we haven't written yet called incorrect password, and go ahead and hit semicolon. It might try and autofill there just because we haven't got the method that exists yet, so take off the on. Again, Control full stop. Let's generate that incorrect password method. So we know we've got it, it's incorrect, the numbers don't match up, so we fire a method for incorrect password. And here's where we're going to call our on incorrect. I think I've changed one of my events. This should be on incorrect. Let's just change that. Make sure yours says on incorrect. That's your Unity event. So we're going to say on incorrect password. We're going to invoke that method and fire it. Everything that we set up in the inspector in that event is going to trigger. And then we are going to start to introduce a delay. So what's going to happen is we get the wrong password. I get a message on the screen that says incorrect password, and then after 2 seconds that's going to disappear. And we're going to control that time, that delay, through a coroutine. So we're going to say start coroutine, and we're going to call this reset keycode, and then a semicolon at the end. Now that coroutine doesn't exist yet, so we're going to go ahead and add that in now. We're going to add it into the very bottom of our script. And coroutines use the keyword IEnumerator. And I'm going to copy and paste my coroutine name here, reset keycode, like so. And now we're going to introduce our delay. And to do that in a coroutine, we're going to say yield return new, and then this is the keyword wait 4 seconds. And if you remember, we actually created a variable for this called reset time. It's got a default of 2 seconds, so we'll go ahead and use that. We open up some brackets and we're going to say reset time. And then once those 2 seconds have elapsed, we want to clear our password, our user password list. So input password list dot clear. We've got a method already built for us to use there, which is handy. So that's going to clear out those lists of all the entries, and we're going to change what's written on our screen. Then we can say our code display dot text. We'll say enter code dot dot dot, and then finish off with a semicolon. And we need an equals in there too. Okay, so remember that's our check password. written down. We've entered 4 numbers into our user entry, and it's going to check once we've reached 4 to see if we've got the right password. It's going to use a for loop. If at any time they don't match up, then it's automatically failed. So it's going to go to a method called incorrect password, which is going to invoke our event for an incorrect password. And it's also going to start a timer to reset the system. Now, one thing we must put in here, which is really important, at the moment, it's going to continuously go through this list. Even though we've called the event and we've exited out through this method, the loop's still going to come back around until we've reached its conclusion, which is when it gets to 4. We actually, if at any time it's wrong, we don't want to come back here. So we can say return. Once we hit this return at this point, it's going to come out of this check password method and the loop will stop. So go ahead and save it there. We should be able to enter an incorrect password now and have it reset. So let's dive into VR. Go ahead and enter 1, 4, 5, and here's the magic 6. It says enter code. Cool. So it did actually work. We haven't displayed to the user that it's checking the password yet or given any access denied, but we can have a look at that in a second. Let's just do it again. 5, 4, 2, 3. Give it a couple of seconds. Enter code. So it's working. Good stuff. So we can use the events on our display panel. We are calling the method, or we're firing the event on incorrect password when we get it wrong. So let's add a plus in here. We can use this. We'll drag in our display panel. And we're going to say TMP input field string text. It's going to say access denied. And then we save it there. Let's run that. Let's check we're all good. So we'll go ahead, enter incorrect code. It says access denied. And then it resets once that coroutine's gone. Let's try it again. Let's do 3, 6, 5. Oh, I changed my mind. We'll take a couple off. Let's do 3, 1, 2, 4. Access denied. We press buttons, nothing happens. And we come back. 4, 5, 1, 2. Access denied. So now let's have a look at actually creating our correct code. So close to it now. So close. So we're checking our password. We've got going back to this method, check password. Now we're going through our loop to see if it's wrong at any time, and if it is, we're going to exit. So this loop's going to keep going around. It's going to finish and complete if they're all the same. So we can safely say that at the end of this loop, if it's got this far, because if it comes across an incorrect one, it's going to return out of this method. If it gets this far outside the loop, we can say that we've got the correct password because we've moved through our loop and they all match up and everything is good in the world. So we can say correct password. We're going to create that method. Again, click on the line, control, full stop, generate method just below. Go ahead and remove the thingy. And you can see there I've got an error. That's because I already have have a list called correct password. Just up there, so we can't use that as a method name. That's okay. Let's call it something else. Let's say correct password used. Correct password given. And then just change the name of the method below. And call that correct password list, really. Dum-dum. Right, so when we've got a correct password, we're going to call the method. And here we're going to do a little bit more logic than we did when we get it wrong. So I don't know if you remember at the start, we had this true or false, this bool for allow multiple activations. There may be an instance where you want to use this key code multiple times. Like it might open a door temporarily and you might want to come back around and you have to enter it again. Oh, that's really annoying. Oh, or you might have access to like a timed box or something and you want to keep having correct answers triggered. So we're going to see that if allow multiple activations, so if we are allowed to do this key code more than once, we can call our onCorrect password event. So anything that happens once we've got it right will happen. We also then need to reset our key code, which we've already all done, so we can use that method again. So we can say reset key code. That'll put the key code thing back to default. And then that's it. Cool. But what if we're not allowed multiple activations. We can only use this key code once. We can say else if, so with the exclamation mark, which basically means that false. So not multiple allow activations. So if allow activations is false and we haven't already used the correct code, because we don't want to keep, so even though we're not allowing multiple activations, they might still come along and just try and enter the code again, and you don't want that event to keep firing. So that's why we've got the bool has used correct code. We can keep a track if they've entered it or not. We can say it has used correct code. At this point, if you're only going through it once, this is already false. We've set that to false, so it needs to be false. So if you're not allowed multiple activations and we haven't already used the key code, then we can say on correct password dot invoke, and then we can say has used correct code will now be true, so it'll never come into this part of the code again unless we change that through another script. And then we also can change the code display. We changed that in our original, we were using events before, but let's do it through the script. So you can see we can go coded display.text equals, and we're going to use our private string called success text. So this is what happens when we get it. This is what it says when we get it right, and you can choose different messages for different key codes if you want. And that is literally it. We've now allowed for a key code that we can enter a 4-digit number in, automatically detects when we've reached a digit limit, checks the password, calls some events, which we can tap into later through different scripts and add listeners to them, and also allows you to go back and try again. That acts like a proper key code. Let's just go ahead and check this is all working. Minimize this. So our success text should be access granted. And now remember, we've left this allow multiple activations is currently false. So we should only be able to do this once. Let's have a look. So come and enter a wrong code a sec. Access denied. Awesome. Let's enter the correct code. 1, 2, 3, 4. Access granted. And it'll just sit like that now because we're not allowing any more activations. Let's stop play. Let's click on allow multiple activations. Click plus. Now we can use this as much as we want, so we can get the right get the right password. It's going to say nothing. And that's because it's come in through this part and we've not added in any display text. It's resetting the key code. So to make this all really super neat, let's copy our coded display success text, put it in just under on correct password, just under the events fired, just before we start the coroutine. And now when we run it, let's just put in the wrong one for a minute. Access denied. It's going to reset. Enter code 1, 2, 3, 4. Access granted. Allow multiple uses is still ticked. It's true, so we're allowed to use it as many times as we want. We can go ahead and put in another one. Access granted. That event's now going to be continuously firing every time we put in the password. So that might be on a door that locks behind you, and every time you come around to it, you need to enter a password. I don't know why you'd have that, but the option's there. So there we go. I think that's quite cool. We've now got a working keypad, which you can actually take out and create a package with, and use in different games where you might have a key code or like something you need to enter. It could be on like the front of a safe. It could open a door. It could open an airlock. Anything you want. And then leveraging these events every time you get the code right to then have other scripts listening for those events and then doing all custom actions based on your input, which is very cool. And we're actually going to use that in our escape room. We're going to put it on a door, or maybe we can put it on like a bomb that's been left in there. We have to enter the code to defuse the bomb. I think that'd be quite cool. But in the next one, at the moment when we're playing our game, it just goes straight in there. And we're going to actually incorporate a timer, which you have done in previous tutorials. But we'll set up our timer. that we can have listening for our keypad event. So when that correct code is entered, the bomb will diffuse itself and the timer will stop. We'll take a look at that next week because this one's been quite a long one, but I hope you enjoyed it. We've done some cool things there. Most of it's all logic and stuff. Very little in terms of the way we use XR Interaction Toolkit, but these scripts are an important aspect of our game on how it's all structured. And don't forget, all this is on my Patreon page, so you can grab the entire project from there and use it however you wish. But thanks very much, and I'll see you in the next one.